Hello my dear viewers, I would like to thank you for watching the video, and I wanted to say subscribe to my YouTube channel. I will be very grateful and you will not miss new videos. Enjoy the video. It started with a coffee. My name's Evelyn and I'm a junior editor at a small publishing house in Chicago. My days are mostly filled with manuscripts and emails, but my evenings are sacred. Just me, a cozy corner table at Blackbird Cafe, and my favorite caramel macchiato. One Thursday night, as I flipped through the latest novel submission, a man sat at the table next to mine. He was hard to miss, clean-cut, late 30s, with a confident smile that instantly drew attention. "You look serious," he said, nodding at my open laptop. I looked up, startled. "Oh, just work," I replied, forcing a polite smile. "Ah, a workaholic," he teased. "I'm Thomas, by the way." "Evelyn," I said cautiously, but something about his easy demeanor made me relax. We talked for a while about books, the weather, and even how Blackbird had the best coffee in the city. He was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. When he left, he smiled and said, "See you around, Evelyn." It felt harmless, but something about the way his smile lingered made me uneasy. Over the next week, Thomas kept showing up at Blackbird Cafe. Always around the same time, always sitting at the table next to mine. At first, it felt like a coincidence, but after the third or fourth time, it started to feel intentional. Not that I minded exactly. He was polite, charming, and seemed genuinely interested in me. But there were moments, subtle ones, where something about him felt off, like when I asked him what he did for a living. "I'm in security," he said one evening, swirling his coffee absent-mindedly. "What kind of security?" I pressed, curious. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "High-risk clients, sensitive situations. It's not as exciting as it sounds." The way he said it was casual, almost too casual, as if he was rehearsed. Later that night, as I walked home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I turned around more than once, but the streets behind me were empty. It was probably nothing, I told myself. Just paranoia, but the feeling didn't go away. The next time I saw Thomas, I wasn't at the cafe. It was in the news. That morning started like any other. I was scrolling through my phone at the kitchen table, sipping coffee, when a headline caught my eye. "Woman found dead in Chicago River. Police suspect foul play." The article described a woman named Rachel Morgan, mid-30s, who had been reported missing 2 days ago. Her body had been found in the early hours of the morning, wrapped in plastic and weighed down with bricks. My stomach churned. It was horrible, but what really stopped me in my tracks was the location. Rachel had last been seen leaving a coffee shop, Blackbird Cafe, my cafe. I set my mug down, hands shaking as I scrolled further. That's when I saw it. A brief mention of a witness report. Someone had seen Rachel talking to a man shortly before she left the cafe. The description was vague but unsettlingly familiar. A tall, clean-cut man in his late 30s wearing a dark coat. Thomas, it had to be him. The thought sent a cold wave of nausea through me. I tried to tell myself it was just a coincidence. After all, how many men in Chicago fit that description, but the timing was too perfect. I remembered how Thomas had joked about being in security and how he always avoided giving too many details about his work. My mind raced as I pieced together the little things I'd noticed but ignored. The way he'd always shown up at the cafe at the same time as me, his ability to steer conversations away from himself, and the strange way he'd smiled when I first met him. I couldn't stop myself. I Googled his name. Nothing came up. Not a single result. A man as friendly and outgoing as Thomas should have some kind of online presence, a LinkedIn profile, a Facebook page, something. The fact that he didn't only made me more suspicious. By the time I arrived at the cafe that evening, my nerves were frayed. I wasn't sure if I was hoping to see him or praying he wouldn't show up. He did. Evelyn. His voice was as cheerful as ever as he slid into the chair across from me. "You're a hard woman to track down." "Busy week," I forced a smile, my heart pounding. "Yeah, something like that." We made small talk for a while, but I could barely focus. All I could think about was the article, the dead woman, and the way the witness had described him. Finally, I worked up the courage to ask, "Hey, Thomas, do you remember Rachel Morgan? She used to come here sometimes." He didn't miss a beat. "Rachel Morgan? Can't say I do. Should I?" His tone was casual, but his eyes were fixed on mine, sharp and unblinking. It was as if he was watching for a reaction. "No," I said quickly, shaking my head. "I just thought maybe you'd met her. She was on the news." He tilted his head, his smile never wavering. "Oh, I don't pay much attention to the news, to depressing." I felt like I couldn't breathe. That night, as I walked home, I couldn't stop glancing over my shoulder. The streets were quiet, but the silence felt heavy, like the city was holding its breath. When I finally got to my apartment, I locked the door behind me and leaned against it, trying to calm my racing heart. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from an unknown number. "You're asking the wrong questions. Evelyn, stop now." I stared at the text on my phone, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. My hands were trembling as I reread the message. "You're asking the wrong questions. Evelyn, stop now." I didn't recognize the number, but whoever it was, they knew my name and they knew I'd been asking about Rachel. I wanted to believe it was a prank, maybe a coincidence, but deep down, I knew better. I locked all my doors and windows, double-checking every latch, then sat on my couch, clutching my phone like a lifeline. My mind raced through possibilities. Was it Thomas, someone connected to him? Or was I just being paranoid? I decided to call my best friend, Jess. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey, what's up?" she asked, her voice light. "Jess, I think I'm in trouble," I blurted. There was a pause. "Evelyn, slow down. What happened?" I told her everything, the news article, my suspicions about Thomas, and the text. As I spoke, I realized how crazy it all sounded. But Jess didn't laugh or tell me I was overreacting. "That's terrifying," she said quietly. "Have you gone to the police?" "I don't have any proof," I said. "Just a gut feeling and a creepy text from an unknown number." "What are they supposed to do with that?" Jess hesitated. "You need to stay away from him, Evelyn. Block the number. Stop going to that cafe. And if anything else happens, anything, you call me first, okay?" I nodded, even though she couldn't see me, "Okay?" That night, I barely slept. Every creak and groan of the apartment building made me jump, and I kept imagining shadows moving outside my window. The next morning, I woke to another text from the same number. "You didn't listen. Meet me at Blackbird tonight. 8 p.m. Come alone." My stomach sank. The implication was clear: if I didn't show up, there would be consequences. All day, I couldn't focus. My thoughts kept circling back to the message. Meet me at Blackbird tonight. 8 p.m. Come alone. It wasn't a request, it was a threat. Just beg me not to go. It's obviously a setup, Evelyn. You don't know what this guy is capable of. I don't have a choice, I said, my voice shaky. If I don't show, who knows what he'll do. Jess wouldn't let it go. Then at least let me call the police. You don't have to face this alone. She was right. I hated the idea of involving them without solid proof, but I was out of options. I told her to call and share everything I told her, then hung up and started preparing for the night. By 7:45, I was sitting in my car outside Blackbird Cafe, my palms sweaty against the steering wheel. The cafe was dimly lit, and through the windows I could see a handful of patrons, none of them familiar, except him. Thomas sat at a corner table, stirring a cup of coffee like he didn't have a care in the world. His calm demeanor sent a fresh wave of dread through me. I got out of the car, my legs trembling as I crossed the street. I stepped inside, the bell above the door jingling softly. The warmth of the cafe was a stark contrast to the icy fear clawing at my chest. Thomas looked up and smiled. Evelyn, right on time. I forced a smile and sat across from him. You wanted to meet. Here I am. He leaned back, studying me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I knew you'd come. You're too curious for your own good. What do you want, Thomas? I asked, keeping my voice steady. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket. My heart stopped as his hand emerged, holding a folded piece of paper. Read it, he said, sliding it across the table. I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. I unfolded the paper, and my blood ran cold. It was a photo of me walking to my apartment, sitting at the cafe, even through my living room window. You've been watching me, I whispered, my throat dry. Thomas smirked. It's my job to know my targets. Targets? My voice broke. What are you talking about? His expression turned cold. Someone hired me to kill you, Evelyn. But I declined the job. I stared at him, paralyzed with fear. Why are you telling me this? He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. Because now they're sending someone else, and I'm the only chance you've got to survive. His words hung in the air like a death sentence. Someone else, I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. Why would anyone want me dead? Thomas shrugged, his calm demeanor unshaken. I don't ask questions. I just complete the assignments, well, most of them. He sipped his coffee like we were discussing the weather. I felt lightheaded, my stomach twisting into knots. You said you declined. Why? Why are you helping me? Thomas studied me for a long moment, his gaze unreadable. I'm not a monster, Evelyn. I don't take contracts that don't feel justified. He smirked like the word was some kind of joke. And you're just an ordinary woman. Whoever wants you gone must have a reason, but it's not my problem anymore. His words felt like both a relief and a threat. I wasn't sure whether to thank him or run for my life. What do I do now? I asked, my voice cracking. He leaned back, his smile fading. You disappear. Change your name, your location, everything. Because the person they'll send next won't hesitate. And once you're in their sights, it's over. No, I said, shaking my head. I can't just leave my life behind. My friends, my job. Thomas cut me off, his tone sharp. If you want to stay alive, you'll do what I say. The weight of his words hit me like a freight train. He wasn't being dramatic, he was giving me my only option. But before I could respond, the cafe door opened and two men in suits walked in. Thomas's eyes flicked toward them, his body tensing. "Well," he muttered, "looks like we're out of time." I followed his gaze and my blood ran cold. The men weren't ordering coffee. They were scanning the room, their eyes landing on me. "Is it them?" I whispered, panic rising in my chest. Thomas nodded, standing casually. "Stay calm, follow my lead." Before I could say anything, he strode toward the men, his movements confident and deliberate. They barely reacted as he approached, but I caught the subtle exchange, a glance, a nod. Then, without warning, Thomas moved. He shoved the first man into a table, sending coffee and chairs flying. The second man reached into his jacket, but Thomas was faster. In one fluid motion, he disarmed him and knocked him unconscious with the butt of the gun. "Let's go," he barked, grabbing my arm and pulling me toward the back exit. We burst into the alley, the cold night air stinging my face. I could hear shouts behind us, but Thomas didn't stop. "Why are you doing this?" I yelled, struggling to keep up. He glanced back, his face grim. "Let's just say I don't like competition." We drove for hours, leaving the city behind. Thomas didn't explain where we were going, and I didn't ask. My mind was too busy reeling from everything that had happened. When he finally pulled over at a rundown motel in the middle of nowhere, he turned to me. "This is where we part ways." I stared at him, disbelief written all over my face. "That's it. You're just going to leave me here." "You'll be safe for now," he said. "I've bought you time, but it's up to you to stay off their radar." I wanted to scream at him, to demand answers, but I knew it was pointless. Thomas wasn't my savior. He was a killer who had spared me for reasons I might never understand. He handed me a burner phone and a small envelope of cash. "Don't call anyone you know. Don't go back to your old life. Trust me, Evelyn, if you do, they'll find you." And just like that, he was gone, disappearing into the night like a shadow. I stood there, clutching the phone and the cash, wondering if I'd ever feel safe again. Hello, my dear viewers. I would like to thank you for watching the video, and I wanted to say subscribe to my YouTube channel. I will be very grateful, and you will not miss new videos. Enjoy the video. My name is Josh Miller, and I've always thought of myself as a regular guy. I live in Chicago, I work in IT, and my life is about as exciting as a tax seminar. Or at least it wasn't until the day I found that apartment. It started on a Thursday. I just moved into a new place, a decent little studio on the edge of downtown. Nothing fancy, but it had a good view of the city, and for someone like me, that was enough. I was unpacking when I noticed something strange. The floor plan didn't match. Let me explain. When I first toured the place, the agent gave me a blueprint of the apartment. It was supposed to be straightforward, a single open room with a kitchenette and a tiny bathroom off to the side. But when I stood in the living room, something felt wrong. The wall across from me seemed closer than it should have been, like there was something behind it. I pulled out the blueprint and double-checked. Sure enough, there was supposed to be an extra 3 feet of space behind that wall. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe it was just poor construction, but curiosity got the better of me, and I started knocking on the wall, looking for anything unusual. That's when I heard a hollow sound. I froze, my hand still pressed against the drywall. Hollow walls meant space, right? But there wasn't supposed to be anything back there. Grabbing a flashlight from one of the moving boxes, I crouched down and inspected the baseboard. That's when I noticed something odd. There was a tiny seam in the wall, barely visible unless you were looking for it. I pressed my fingers against it, and to my surprise, the panel popped open. Behind it was a narrow passage. It wasn't much, just a dark, cramped corridor that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. The air smelled stale, like dust and mildew. I should have closed the panel and gone back to unpacking. But something about the passage called to me, like it was daring me to explore. I stepped inside, flashlight in hand, and started walking. The corridor was tight, the walls pressing in on either side. After a few feet, it opened into a small, windowless room. The first thing I noticed was the furniture. It was old, really old. A battered armchair sat in one corner, its fabric torn and stained. There was a wooden table with deep scratches across the surface and a rusted lamp that didn't look like it had worked in years. But what really caught my attention was the wall. It was covered in photographs, dozens of them, pinned up haphazardly. Some were black and white, others faded with age. They all showed the same thing: people. Random people walking through the city, sitting in cafes, standing at bus stops. And in every photo, their faces were crossed out with thick, red ink. My stomach churned as I scanned the wall, my flashlight trembling. These weren't just snapshots, they felt deliberate, like someone had been watching these people. In the center of the wall was a larger photo, framed and hung like a centerpiece. It was of a man, mid-30s, clean-shaven, wearing a suit and tie. His face wasn't crossed out like the others, but there was something unsettling about the way he looked at the camera, like he knew whoever was taking the picture. Beneath the frame was a single word scrawled in red ink, WHY. That was enough for me. I turned and bolted back through the passage, slamming the panel shut behind me. My heart was racing, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just walked into something I wasn't supposed to see. But as I stood there, trying to calm down, I heard it. A soft creak. It came from inside the passage. Someone or something was moving in there. I froze, my ear pressed against the wall, straining to hear. The creaking sound wasn't loud, but it was deliberate, slow, measured, like someone taking careful steps. I wanted to convince myself it was just my imagination. Maybe the building was old, the pipes shifting, or the walls settling. But deep down, I knew better. Someone or something was in that passage. I grabbed my phone and called the landlord. It went straight to voicemail. Figures. "Hi, this is Josh Miller in 3C, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I think there's something weird going on with the apartment. Can you call me back when you get this?" I hung up and stood there for a moment, debating what to do. I didn't hear the creaking anymore, but that didn't mean whoever or whatever it was had left. The rest of the night was a blur. I stayed in the living room, pacing back and forth, staring at the spot where the panel was hidden. I didn't sleep. I didn't even try. By morning, I'd convinced myself it was time to leave. Whatever this was, I didn't want any part of it. I started packing my things when my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. You shouldn't have opened it. I stared at the screen, my stomach churning. How did they have my number? My hand shook as I typed back, "Who is this?" No response. Instead, I heard a knock at the door. I approached cautiously, every nerve in my body screaming at me to run. But when I peeked through the peephole, I saw a man standing in the hallway. He was wearing a suit and tie, his face clean-shaven, his posture rigid. It was the man from the photograph. My breath caught in my throat. He didn't move, didn't knock again. He just stood there, staring straight ahead like he knew I was watching. I stepped back, my heart pounding. This wasn't possible. The photograph looked like it was decades old. How could he be standing here now? The knocking came again, louder this time. I backed away, clutching my phone, debating whether to call the police. But before I could dial, the knocking stopped. When I looked through the peephole again, he was gone. That evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The air in the apartment felt heavier, like the walls were closing in. I kept hearing faint sounds, creaks, whispers, the occasional soft thud, but every time I checked, there was nothing there. Then I heard the panel. It was a soft click, like someone opening it. My blood ran cold as I grabbed my flashlight and crept toward the wall. I pressed my ear against it, listening. Nothing. Slowly, I pushed the panel open, shining the flashlight inside. The passage was empty, just as dark and narrow as before. But when I stepped inside, I noticed something new, another photograph. It was pinned to the far wall where the furniture and other photos had been. This one was of me, taken from the passage. I was sitting on my couch, staring at the wall. The time stamp in the corner was from last night. Pinned beneath the photo was a note, "You're next." I don't think I've ever been as terrified as I was in that moment. Seeing myself in the photograph, proof that someone had been in my apartment watching me, made my stomach churn. I stumbled out of the passage, slamming the panel shut behind me. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped the flashlight. I grabbed my phone and called 911. The operator's voice was calm, almost detached. 911, what's your emergency? There's someone in my apartment, I stammered. They've been inside. They've been watching me. Are they in the apartment now? I hesitated, glancing toward the panel. I don't know. The operator asked for my address and told me to stay on the line, but I couldn't. I hung up and grabbed my keys, ready to leave. But when I opened the door to the hallway, I froze. The man in the suit was standing there again. His expression was blank, almost bored, but his eyes locked onto mine as soon as the door opened. "You can't leave," he said. His voice was calm, matter-of-fact, like he was stating the weather. I didn't respond. I just slammed the door and locked it, my heart racing. I grabbed my backpack and stuffed it with whatever I could find: wallet, phone charger, a bottle of water. I didn't care about anything else. All I knew was that I had to get out of there. I ran to the window, my mind racing. I was on the 3rd floor, but maybe I could climb down somehow. Before I could decide, I heard it again, the creaking. This time, it wasn't coming from the panel. It was coming from inside the apartment. I turned slowly, my flashlight scanning the room. The shadows seemed deeper, darker, like they were alive. "Josh," a voice whispered. I whipped around, the beam of light catching the edge of the couch. No one was there. "Josh," the voice said again, closer this time. It wasn't the man in the suit. It was me. The voice was mine, but it was distorted, wrong, like hearing a recording played underwater. I backed toward the door, my breath coming in short gasps. The panel on the wall creaked open, and for a split second I saw something move inside. A shadow, tall and angular, just before the panel slammed shut again. I yanked the door open and ran. The hallway was empty. I bolted for the stairs, taking them two at a time. My only thought was to get as far away from that apartment as possible. When I reached the lobby, I saw the police officers talking to the landlord. Relief flooded through me as I rushed toward them. "You have to help me," I said, my voice shaking. "Someone's in my apartment. They've been following me." The landlord frowned. "Josh, what are you talking about?" I opened my mouth to respond, but one of the officers cut me off. "What apartment are you in?" 3C, I said. The landlord's frown deepened. 3C. "That's been empty for years." I froze. "What?" "No, I just moved in, a week ago." The landlord shook his head. "That apartment's been boarded up since the fire. No one's lived there since." His words cut off as the officers exchanged a look. "What fire?" I demanded. The landlord hesitated. "It happened 5 years ago. Some guy lived there, kept to himself, didn't talk to anyone. One day, there was smoke pouring out of the place. By the time the fire department got in, he was gone. Just disappeared." "What was his name?" I asked, my stomach twisting. The landlord hesitated again, then finally said, "Frank. Something. Frank Miller." My blood ran cold. Miller. That was my last name. My knees went weak. Miller. My last name? Was it a coincidence? It had to be, right? "No," I said, shaking my head. "That's not possible. I moved in last week. I've been staying there and packing, sleeping, everything." The landlord's expression darkened. "Josh, you've got the wrong apartment. 3C is sealed. It's been vacant since the fire." One of the officers stepped forward. "Sir, we'll go upstairs and take a look. Why don't you wait here?" "No," I said quickly. "I'm coming with you. You need to see it for yourself." We climbed the stairs together, my heart pounding louder with every step. When we reached the 3rd floor, I froze. The door to 3C was different. It wasn't the plain brown door I'd left behind. It was charred, blackened by fire, with a faint smell of smoke still clinging to it. Yellow caution tape crisscrossed the frame, brittle and faded. "This can't be right," I whispered. The officer nearest to me pulled out a flashlight and shone it at the door. "Sir, no one's been in here for years. It's condemned." I didn't believe him. I shoved past them, pushing the door open. It creaked loudly, the hinges stiff with rust. The air inside was thick and heavy, carrying the acrid smell of soot and decay. The apartment was nothing like I remembered. The walls were scorched, the furniture reduced to ash and twisted metal. The window I'd tried to climb out of was shattered, the glass still littering the floor. "This isn't real," I muttered, stepping inside. This isn't my apartment, but it was. In the corner, half buried in debris, was the panel I'd found. It was partially open, just as I'd left it. The officer followed my gaze, frowning. "What's that?" I didn't answer. I walked to the panel and pushed it open. The passage was still there, just as dark and narrow as before. "I told you," I said, my voice trembling. "There's something in here." The officer hesitated, then motioned for his partner to follow. "Stay behind us." We stepped into the passage, the beam of their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The walls felt closer than I remembered, the air colder. When we reached the end, the small room was just as I'd left it. The scratched table, the old chair, the photographs on the wall, everything was there. Except for one thing, the man in the suit was sitting in the chair. His face was shadowed, but I recognized him instantly. My breath caught in my throat as the officers froze, their flashlights fixed on him. "Sir, you need to stand up," one of them said, his voice steady but tense. The man didn't move. "Sir, I'm giving you one last chance," the officer warned. Still nothing. The second officer moved closer, reaching out to grab the man's shoulder. The moment he touched him, the lights went out. The darkness was absolute, swallowing everything. I couldn't see, couldn't hear anything except my own breathing, and then the voice came again. "You shouldn't have come back, Josh." It was him, the man in the suit, but it was also me. The sound of footsteps echoed around the room, circling me closer and closer. My chest tightened as panic took over. "Who are you?" I shouted into the void. His voice came from behind me, cold and steady. "I'm what you left behind." Suddenly, the lights flickered back on. The room was empty. The officers were gone. And the photographs on the wall, they were different. They all showed me. Dozens of pictures, taken at different points in my life, playing as a kid, sitting in class, walking to work. In the center was the same photograph I'd seen before, the man in the suit. Only now, his face wasn't blank, it was mine. Beneath it, written in red ink, was a single word: welcome. The screen fades to black as Josh's voice delivers the final line. Josh voiceover: "Some places don't just remember you. They hold on to you forever." Text appears on screen. The end. Hello my dear viewers, I would like to thank you for watching the video, and I wanted to say subscribe to my YouTube channel. I will be very grateful and you will not miss new videos. Enjoy the video. My name is Megan Harris. I'm 25 and I live in a small town in Pennsylvania, the kind of place where the highlight of the week is the Friday farmers market. Nothing exciting ever happens here, and I was fine with that. Until last month when everything changed. It was a Thursday morning, and I was heading out the door for work when I saw the package. It was sitting on my porch, small, unassuming, with no return address. At first, I didn't think much of it. Online shopping is basically a sport for me, and I've lost count of how many random packages I've ordered and forgotten about. But when I looked closer, I noticed something strange. The name on the label wasn't mine. It was addressed to A. Daniel Rhodes. There wasn't anyone named Daniel in my building, let alone on my street. Maybe it was a mistake, I thought. I'd just drop it off at the post office later. But as I picked it up, I felt something shift inside, a metallic clink, like keys or coins rattling together. My curiosity got the better of me. I brought it inside and set it on the kitchen counter. That's when I noticed the writing. Scrawled in shaky black marker across the side of the box were two words: "Do not." I sat there staring at it for what felt like forever. Do not what? Open it. Touch it. Was this someone's idea of a joke? My curiosity won out, like it always does. I grabbed a knife and sliced the tape. Inside, wrapped in crumpled newspaper, was a small black case. It was the kind you'd expect to find in a hardware store, plain, scuffed, and unremarkable. I unlatched it and opened the lid. Inside was a USB drive. That was it. No note, no explanation. Just a plain black USB drive resting in a foam insert, like it was something important. I turned it over in my hands, wondering what could possibly be on it. Photos, documents. Whatever it was, someone had gone through a lot of trouble to make sure it got to. Well, not me. I knew I shouldn't plug it in. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. I sat at my desk staring at the USB drive like it was some kind of ticking bomb. Part of me knew I should just leave it alone. Whatever was on there wasn't meant for me. But the other part of me, the curious, stubborn part, wouldn't let it go. I plugged it into my laptop. At first, nothing happened. The drive didn't auto-open, and no files appeared on my screen. I clicked into it manually, and there it was, a single folder labeled Watch Me. My stomach twisted as I clicked on it. Inside the folder was a single video file. No title, no description, just a timestamp, 1:1 for 2:11:17 p.m. I hesitated for a moment, then clicked play. The video started with shaky, grainy footage of a dimly lit living room. It looked normal enough: beige carpet, a couch, a coffee table with a half-empty mug on it. But something about the angle was unsettling. It was like the camera was hidden, filming from somewhere high up, maybe a shelf or a vent. A man walked into the frame, late 30s, scruffy beard, wearing a wrinkled flannel shirt. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. He sat down on the couch, rubbing his hands over his face. For a long moment, nothing happened, and then he looked directly at the camera. "I don't know who you are," he said, his voice low and shaky. "But if you're watching this, I'm already dead." My breath caught in my throat. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he continued. "I thought I could handle it, but now they're after me. They'll be after you, too." The man reached for something off-screen and held it up, a black USB drive, identical to the one I'd found in the package. "They'll want this back. Don't let them have it." The screen flickered, the image distorting for a split second. When it came back, the man was gone. The camera still faced the living room, but now it was empty. And then the knocking started. It was faint at first, somewhere off-screen. The camera didn't move, but the sound grew louder, more frantic, until it echoed through the speakers. The video cut to black. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. What had I just watched? Before I could process it, my phone buzzed. A text. It was from an unknown number. "Where is it?" My stomach dropped when I saw the text. "Where is it?" My hands shook as I typed back, "Who is this?" The response came instantly. "You have something that doesn't belong to you. Return it, and no one gets hurt." My breath caught in my throat. Whoever this was, they knew I had the USB drive. I thought about calling the police, but what would I even say? "Hi, someone sent me a creepy package and now I'm getting threatening texts." That wasn't going to cut it. Instead, I unplugged the USB drive, shoved it back into its case, and started pacing. My mind raced, replaying the man's words from the video. "They'll be after you, too." Who were they, and why did this drive matter so much? The buzzing sound of another text snapped me out of my thoughts. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." I swallowed hard, my chest tightening. Whoever this was, they weren't bluffing. And then I heard it. A knock at the front door. I froze, my pulse hammering in my ears. No one knocks at my door without calling first. Not my friends, not my neighbors, not even delivery drivers. I crept toward the peephole, my heart pounding. A man stood on the porch. Mid-30s, clean-cut, wearing a black jacket. He didn't look particularly threatening, but there was something off about the way he stood rigid, like he was forcing himself to stay calm. He knocked again, harder this time. "Miss Harris," he called out. His voice was smooth, almost polite. "We know you have the package. Open the door and we'll handle this quickly." I stepped back, my stomach churning. How did he know my name? Another knock, this one louder. "Megan," he said, his voice dropping. "If you don't open the door, we're coming in." I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, but the line wouldn't connect. No dial tone, no static, just silence, and then the back door creaked open. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. I'd locked that door, I was sure of it. Footsteps echoed from the kitchen, slow and deliberate. I didn't wait to see who it was. I grabbed the USB drive and bolted for the bedroom, locking the door behind me. My mind raced as I tried to figure out what to do. The only window in the room was too small to climb through, and there was no way I could fight off whoever was in the house. Then I remembered the video. The man had said they wanted the drive. That was all they cared about. I pulled it out of the case, my hands trembling, and stared at it. Was this thing really worth my life? A loud bang on the bedroom door made my decision for me. I stuffed the drive into my pocket, climbed onto the bed, and pushed open the attic access panel in the ceiling. I hoisted myself up just as the door burst open below. From the attic, I could hear them searching the room, their voices low and urgent. "She's not here," one of them said. "She has the drive," another replied. She couldn't have gone far. They were right. I couldn't stay up there forever, but I wasn't about to hand over the drive without answers. That's when I noticed it. The attic wasn't as empty as I thought. In the corner, buried beneath old insulation, was a box. A box identical to the one the USB drive had come in. I crawled toward the box, my breath shaky, ears straining to catch every sound from below. The men were still searching the house, their voices muffled and tense. My fingers brushed the dusty lid, and I pulled it toward me. It was identical to the first box, same size, same scuffed surface, even the same faint smell of must. Inside, wrapped in brittle newspaper, was another USB drive. My heart sank. How many of these were there? What could possibly be so important about them? Before I could think about it, a voice echoed from below. "She's in the attic." I froze, the sound of footsteps rushing toward the bedroom. They knew where I was. I had seconds to decide. Grabbing the new drive, I clambered toward the far end of the attic, where a small ventilation window faced the backyard. I shoved it open, the cool night air hitting my face as I pulled myself through. I dropped onto the grass below, landing hard, but adrenaline pushed me forward. I sprinted toward the tree line at the back of the yard, clutching both drives in my hand. Behind me, I heard the sound of the attic window creaking open. "She's outside," one of them shouted. I didn't stop. I ran into the woods, my legs burning, branches tearing at my skin. The sounds of pursuit grew fainter as I plunged deeper into the darkness. Eventually, I collapsed against a tree, gasping for breath. The drives were still in my hands, their hard edges digging into my palms. Once I was sure I hadn't been followed, I turned on my phone. The screen flickered to life, and to my surprise, I had service again. My first instinct was to call the police, but I stopped myself. What was I going to say? That strange man had broken into my house, chasing me over a USB drive. That I'd found a second one in my attic, Instead, I opened the browser and searched the one name I could think of, Daniel Rhodes. A few results popped up, mostly random social media profiles. But one link caught my eye, a news article from 3 months ago. The headline read, "Tech CEO found dead in apparent murder-suicide." I clicked on it, my stomach twisting. The article described Daniel Rhodes as the founder of a cybersecurity company. He'd been found dead in his home, along with his wife and young daughter. The police believed it was a murder-suicide, but some details didn't add up. One line jumped out at me. Investigators noted that a significant portion of Rhodes's personal files were missing, and his home computer had been wiped clean, the drives. It had to be connected. Whatever was on them, Daniel Rhodes had been killed for it. My phone buzzed. A text. This time it was from the same unknown number that had been messaging me all night. "You can't run forever, Megan." My hands shook as another message came through. "It's not just your life at stake. Return the drives." I stared at the screen, my mind racing. They knew my name, where I lived, and now they knew I had 2 drives. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a video file. I hesitated, then pressed play. The video showed my parents. They were sitting at the dining room table, their faces pale and terrified. A man in a black jacket stood behind them, holding something just out of frame. "If you want them to live," the man said, his voice cold, "you'll bring the drives to the location we send you." The video cut off. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just about me anymore. I stared at the 2 drives in my hands, my mind spinning. Whatever secrets Daniel Rhodes had hidden on these drives, they were dangerous enough to kill for. And now I was holding them. I didn't know what to do, but one thing was clear. I couldn't trust anyone. The screen fades to black as Megan's voice delivers the final line. Megan voiceover, "Some secrets are too dangerous to keep and too deadly to let go."